Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to our panel presentation, the economic contributions of the Latinx community in Missouri. So yeah, my name is Gerardo Martinez, Director of Alianzas, a program that started in 2001 between the collaboration of MU Extension and UMKC Institute for Human Development. And I'm also a member of the Latinx Communities in Missouri Committee. So this committee, as Lisa was mentioning, was created to ensure that the diverse history and contributions of the Latinx communities in Missouri are also represented in the Missouri 2021 bicentennial celebration. This event is the second of a series that will be held monthly until November. In this event, we will hear presentations by Isandra, Martinez, Hughes. We're not related, right, Sandra, to my knowledge, of the Branson Lakes Area Chamber of Commerce and the Conventions and Visitors Bureau and Cheney County Partnership. Also, we'll hear from Karlos Ramirez of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Metro St. Louis and a good friend, Pedro Zamora of the Hispanic Economic Development Corporation, HEDC, in Kansas City. So we thank the support of our generous sponsors for this event. So Cambio Center, UMKC, Institute for Human Development, Alianzas, MU Extension, and LCIM, which is our committee, officially sponsored the LUNAW, Missouri of Kansas Laborist District Council. So we're very deeply thankful for their sponsorship. So we will end the conversation with a brief questions and answers. So you can submit your questions at any time through the chat. To begin today's event, please help me to welcome our moderator, Jeff Samborski. He is a proud lifelong Missourian. So for these past 3 years, Jeff has worked for the MU Extension as a community engagement specialist in the Platte County, Missouri. Prior to this position, he also worked as a counselor and coaching small businesses across several counties of Missouri. And he managed also the city of the North Kansas City's Economic Development Program for 25 years, beginning in 1989. Jeff, I didn't know that you were here since then. So Jeff has owned and operated several businesses as well. And he's a certified economic developer by the International Economic Development Council. And he holds a Master's of Public Affairs degree in Government and Business Relations from Park University. So please help us to welcome Jeff Samborski. Thank you, Jeff. Go ahead with our great panelists.
Thank you, Gerardo. Well, I'm pleased to be part of this conversation today as moderator. It brought me back several years ago. I was the city liaison to North Kansas City's centennial celebration when they celebrated their 100-year anniversary, and it had great fanfare. And I noticed that the growth of that industrial city began back in the 1900s, and it coincided with a very active economic development program. Actually, the program not only attracted new industries, but it emphasized the recruitment of a reliable workforce to the Kansas City area. The most prolific of the efforts was done by our North Kansas City Development Company. And they brought in everything from the amenities such as housing, commercial stores, parks and recreation, transportation, and all kinds of public services. They even helped get our water department, the police and fire services up. But so far, I don't really see, well, and as a result of that, my grandparents, Louis and Julia Samborski, left a small village in Romania about 100 years ago and came directly to Kansas City to continue on with growing their young family through farming and a lot of the dominant industries of the time, like railroads. And now 100 years later, I see that a lot of things are coming back around. For example, I see the biggest challenge for Missouri and the United States for growing our economy is, again, access to workforce. However, I have to question, is there a consensus how we can really attract a good, viable workforce to Missouri and retain those folks? Is there a realization that there still needs to be that holistic approach, that we look at all these community attributes from housing to even those less tangible things like the attitudes of our stakeholders? Perhaps we'll get some answers to these and some other questions as we enjoy our dialogue here with three distinguished guests that I'll introduce now. And by the way, you're welcome to insert your questions into the chat box, and following the presentations, we'll have time hopefully to get those answers by our esteemed panelists. So it's my pleasure now to briefly introduce our three guests. First will be Izzy Hughes, who works for the Taney County Partnership and develops, implements, and assesses multicultural exchange and workforce initiatives. Izzy manages workforce development projects for the Taney County, Missouri area, including Exchange Summer Work Travel Program, Hispanic Workforce Coalition, and others. Izzy stands as a leader in the Taney County community. She serves by organizing the annual Community Workforce Summit for Taney County area employees and maintenance of community and cultural resources to meet the needs of businesses and participants. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and let Izzy take it away, and then I'll introduce Karlos Ramirez as our next guest speaker, if that's okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate it. Well, I'll start because I know that there have been already 3 different locations that have been mentioned. So like, I thought they said she's chamber member. So for those that aren't familiar with our Branson Chamber of Commerce, we actually are a 3-branch entity. So it's chamber, a TCP, and a CVB all in one building. So the way I like to make more sense is we are the economic development branch for the Chamber of Commerce. So that's made up of Taney County residents, businesses, and we come together pretty much, it's a board-led organization. And we used to be a team of 2, now a team of 3. And my part with that in particular is the role with Director of Communications and Programs. So I implement our programs for our community. So just to help break it down a little bit further, what we do usually as economic development falls into 3 branches. So for us, our focus is business retention and expansion, also education within the workforce, and marketing as well. And so my role within that is, I would say some of our programs that he had mentioned are the Hispanic Workforce Coalition, and I'll go into a little bit details of what that looks like. The other ones would be, we have a workforce development collaborative, we have a relocation and platform information guide. So if anyone is wanting to move into the area, they're able to get on that site and see things such as what's it like living here, the types of jobs, what's there to do, schooling. We've also recently have made it so that that page is available fully in Spanish. So they'll just be able to click a button and have access to all that information. And then we also do a lot of programs where, since Branson is very tourism, we do get a lot of visitors over the summer. And one thing that we kind of help aid with that in terms of employment is we have a great program that we work with, which is an exchange program where international students come here to Branson and they work for the summer at our attractions and rides and restaurants. And predominantly of the students will end up being from Dominican Republic or from Jamaica or Caribbean islands. So there's a lot of mixing in there, as well as we do Puerto Rico recruitment trips, which what that looks like is we help position employers to meet the best qualified talent. So we host job fairs, which lately have been both hospitality and healthcare, recruiting in local colleges and universities. These events are open and marketed to the public. And then employers have the opportunity to connect and follow up with those who have signed up for interviews and dates. That is a very big initiative on our end because we are grabbing employers, we are shifting them through a process and then bringing them to Puerto Rico and kind of having that connections where they do a job fair. And then those that are interested can work in Branson either for a summer season or if they choose year-round as well. And the reason we did that one in particular was that with Puerto Rico being tourism and Branson, us also being tourism, we have opposite peak seasons. So when their peak season's in winter, our peak season is not during that time. So they're able to work and make that money. And then when their peak season ends, they're able to come here for a summer and make extra money that they can bring back to their land as well. So there's that. We also have workforce summits. So our goal and initiative there is to just make sure that not only employers, but those that are wanting to get positions are able to get information and informed. So All our resources we'll have on our websites and our pages. Our roles change depending on what the community needs are. So these may be our programs today, but they might change within 6 months or a year. So we always have an open ear to find out what the community needs. And we have a lot of fun events too. With Hispanic Workforce Coalition, one of the big things we started out with was, hey, instead of just saying, here are resources and here's information, let's have a dance night. Let's have a party. Let's get the community out. Let's get us together and just hear what they need, hear what they want. We don't want to make sure that we are supplying information and resources that are actually relevant to our community in particular. So I don't know how much time I've taken up there, but that's just a little bit of our role and what we have done. And if there are any questions or any follow-ups, I am more than happy to answer. Oh,
Jeff,
you're muted, Jeff.
You're muted, Jeff.
Thank you, Izzy. So next we'll hear from Karlos Ramirez. And Karlos is the president and CEO of Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Metropolitan St. Louis. The Hispanic Chamber seeks to improve business opportunities for Hispanic firms and professionals, thereby improving the economic development of the St. Louis region. In his role, Ramirez is responsible for overseeing all aspects of the Hispanic Chamber's operations, including donor cultivation, member relations, event management, and solidifying partnerships with outside organizations. Under his leadership, the Hispanic Chamber has grown its membership by 201% and increased corporate sponsorship by 707%. Wow. Prior to joining the Hispanic Chamber, Ramirez was the director of the University Center and Conference Services at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. Please join me in welcoming Karlos Ramirez. Karlos?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Jeff, for the introduction, and thank you to everybody for being on this call. Obviously, this is a topic that's really important to everyone that's on the call, and for those of us that are in the know, we think that this is an extremely important topic, as economic development in Missouri, I think, could be helped as well as workforce development and population increasing by taking advantage and really focusing on the Hispanic population a little bit more. With that, we have actually been around since 1982. And while we have been around for quite some time, I feel like we're still a young organization because we've only had paid staff for 11 years. I've been in the role for 10 years. And luckily, we were just able to get really organized and be able to have people invest in us and understand, as we start talking about different statistics and we look for the information to help build a case for why it's economically imperative to really focus and invest in the Hispanic population, we've been able to get a lot of people to invest in us for that reason. Like any other chamber of commerce, we're focusing on networking, connecting people together. Now, half of our membership are non-Hispanic owned businesses that are looking to tap into the Hispanic workforce, Hispanic buying power, or to fill some supplier diversity initiatives. But those people obviously join to connect with our other half of our membership, which are the Hispanic owned businesses and population. So oftentimes we're really just trying to help connect individuals with jobs, help these people create new businesses, and hopefully be able to help them to work smarter and not harder. And I think providing that technical assistance through our business counselor, through some of our programming, that's how we're trying to help our people to really get to be better employees, to be better businesses. And so by working with our foundation, we also created a program called the Hispanic Leadership Institute, which is a leadership development program for Hispanics. And when we learned that our population is so young, we then created a high school Hispanic Leadership Institute, which is really formatted after our adult program, but scaled down. So for example, in our adult program, we may have a topic of pretty much learning about financials, profit and loss, balance sheet, things like that. But for the high school version, it's about financial literacy. So really it's just trying to help people to understand how to be good leaders, know themselves as a leader, know what's out there, and ideally they'll be able to utilize their leadership to then get more involved in the region. So our vision is that after we've had a couple of hundred participants go through the program, they'll get involved on nonprofit boards and be able to have an impact on the region. So I will leave my introduction at that, and thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you, Karl. Thank you, Karlos. Last but not least, we'll hear from Pedro Zamora. Pedro is a lifetime Missourian and an innovative and seasoned executive with over 30 years of experience in advanced research and development in the telecommunications industry. He serves as executive director for the Hispanic Economic Development Corporation in Kansas City and its subsidiary, Impacto Fund, a certified CDFI. That's a community development financial institution, I believe. Pedro blends his expertise in small business ownership, entrepreneurship, technology, and product development with his passion for building inclusive community development to advance the equitable opportunities for underrepresented Latinos, minorities, and women through HEDC's integrated business, financial, technology, and training programs. Thank you. Let us welcome Pedro Zamora.
Good afternoon, Jeff. Thank you for the introduction, and to all my colleagues who are joining us, thank you for all the great work that you're doing as I take notes and begin to understand what the full state of Missouri is dealing with as we try to create an economic identity for the Latino immigrants that are here in our great state of Missouri. As the executive director, I have the pleasure of serving a staff of 9 young, bright individuals. HEDC is a community development corporation, a 501c3 not-for-profit, but I continue to ask my team over the last 5 years to think as an entrepreneur, think innovative, think like our clients that we serve. Predominantly, we serve 99.1% of Latinos that are immigrant refugees that migrate to the state of Missouri. Why would someone leave the beautiful coast of Costa Rica or Cancun to come and settle in the state of Missouri? Missouri is a great welcoming state. I born and raised here, educated in the state of Missouri, but the economic opportunities are yet to begin equally within our great state of Missouri. As a CDC, we focus with community capacity planning. We work with small businesses in key corridors. We help them revitalize distressed communities. And we also have what we call as a game changer, access to capital. In 2018, we became a community development financial institution. When I was asked to serve as the executive director, I hadn't a clue coming from corporate America what my commitment level was going to be. But we set 3 agendas for us. One, what does it mean to bring entrepreneurship at a level that will contribute to the economic growth of not only the individual, but ways of tracking it in the state of Missouri? Second, how do we get access to capital? And what are we going to do to bring new forms of capital into the great state of Missouri? And that was driven by our need to become a community development financial institution, one of about 890 certified across the United States by the US Department of Treasury. Not being a banker, I thought it was going to be easy. Being an engineer, I understood analytics and data, but it's a rigorous process, but it's well worth every minute as you apply to become one. The third component that we added into the wheelhouse when I came on board was education. What does it mean to take an immigrant refugee, an urban citizen who has a 2nd to 7th grade education at best? How do we change their belief in themselves that they can be a contributing factor to our growing economy, as well as a contributing voice to what their community should look like as they redevelop? Economic development has its consequences, and we see that in the form of displacement in housing, high housing costs, gentrification, bad words, things that put us on our heels and pit us against each other. What we do at HEDC, and I compliment both Karlos and Izzy in the structure of encouraging our clients to be a part of the community engagement. We teach core 21st century core skills for negotiations. We do cognitive behavior techniques to change their perception of who they are and how they can contribute as a leader to the community. More importantly, we focus on the parents. The parents are the most critical component of our recovery post-pandemic and pre-pandemic because they pay the taxes. They have the dollar bills. I get in trouble plenty of times by saying, I'm not wanting to build another program that's going to help a kid. The kids will get serviced. The great state of Missouri's Department of Secondary Education has a robust program that helps us track and funds our children to get educated, if they choose to be educated. Our role at HEDC is to educate the parents, to help them understand the importance of being a part of the system and contributing to the system. With that, we've converted from silo-based educational programs into an integrated platform that takes digital, financial, and business development, as well as community placekeeping techniques into the fingertips of our clients digitally online. It paid off for us, the hard work that we did, researching and understanding the cultural relevance of what it means to move a person, an individual. We served over 1,300 clients online last year, non-repetitive clients during COVID, helping them navigate through many different complex channels of health, social service, and most importantly, financial accountability of their business as it's recovering during COVID. I'm pleased to be here, and I look forward to the dialogue that we'll have this afternoon.
Thank you, Pedro. Before we go on, I want to make sure that we do recognize a sponsor, and that is LAUNA, which is the Missouri-Kansas Laborers District Council. We appreciate their support for this program. And at this point, we're going to kind of open up to our panelists here, and I've got a question here to kick us off. And I think it's maybe the elephant in the room for the last year and a half has been that we're all facing this pandemic. It's really left no one unscathed. And for our panelists, I'd like to ask, really, how have you seen this impact the Latinx community, and especially the businesses and the employees, and maybe you have an example or some case studies and on some things that you're trying to do to help us through this crisis, again, especially the Latinx community.
My first thought initially for our community, one of the struggles would be particularly actually with Latino women in terms of pandemic affecting childcare. So there has been a struggle. Childcare was already a struggle before the pandemic. So now that some services have shut down because of due to the exposure or the fear, a lot of women are kind of having to decide, okay, where else can I either send my child to, or do I have to stay at home and try to find a solution that way? So I would say that for our area, I would say besides housing, because that's always another one, childcare was one of the big ones that particularly affected the women within our community.
Any others want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would say that in addition to the issue for women that I've heard from a lot of the Latinas involved with our Hispanic Chamber, there's also the fact that we have a significant amount of our Hispanic population being on the front line as working in restaurants and being unemployed, and whether it's construction or different industries that we're working in, that has created problems for us not to be able to work from home. You know, and the interesting thing about Missouri in general is that we almost don't have a middle ground, whereas Missouri actually has a majority of we're ranked 9th in the country for Hispanics with bachelor's degree or higher. So we have the educated, where we have the luxury of working from home, but we also have a wide variety of people that are on the front lines working in the service industry, and so that creates an interesting balance. In addition to that, I also think that because almost 69% of Hispanics are born in the United States, I think that also creates a different duality in our population. Whereas, those that are born here may have bought into a lot of our systems, a lot of things that are going on, versus immigrants to the country. So I think we really have kind of people on both ends. Certainly we have a lot of Hispanics that are professionals, but the other half of the Hispanics really are just on the front lines and struggling with having to work hourly jobs, and oftentimes multiple jobs. So that creates even more problems.
We're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in Kansas City. We're not a promoter of, we're here in working hourly wages. The majority of the clients that we work with, 72% of the 99.9% I mentioned earlier are Latinas. And they had to make some tough decisions. Our organization had to make tough decisions. We closed our doors on February 19th, 2020 for public engagement. But we were ready and rolled into an online digital platform. And as a technologist, I believe that it's important that we bring the tools that are in corporate America to the fingertips of our small business owners. It's more critical today now than ever. And as we looked at the first round of federal and as well as some of our state and grant initiatives and our local philanthropic initiatives, less than 89% of Latino business owners receive PPP. The numbers get worse as you start looking at their availability to receive a stimulus check. And those numbers get even worse when it comes down to unemployment benefits. With that, we saw an increase of small businesses that were impacted by the COVID shutdown. But what we saw also were the family members who decided to leave the family business and start a secondary business, one that was not impacted by the pandemic, in the construction field, as well as whatever it took to get them a living wage to survive. We would love to say sustainability is in the Latino entrepreneurial's vocabulary. I'm still stuck figuring out, is it a rescue strategy that we've been working on since I've joined this organization? When do we call it sustainability? So many headwinds were against the Latino community. Again, no stimulus check, no unemployment, no subsidies. That did not stop us from growing 70 new businesses in the state of Missouri within 6 months after the pandemic started. They had to reinvent their ideas, reinvent themselves. And now that the healthcare cap has opened up, we are now seeing 2 businesses being formed out of one family business that sometimes we get comfortable in saying, well, our banderia, our ganaceria is the perfect one. But if we force a person to take a secondary opportunity in life, COVID did allow that. And we saw an increase in businesses here in Kansas City and ones that we started. The unfairness of recognizing the Latino contribution economically because of the financial institutions measuring on a black-white disparity ratio, because ethnicity is not a defined characteristics in some of our federal funding parameters, that prohibited getting resources into the hands of the Latino immigrant and refugees that are in our state of Missouri.
Thank you.
Jeff, I did want to add a couple of things in regards to how it's impacted the Latino population. One of it is, I think there's a hesitancy to get vaccinated. And I find that more in the immigrant, the international population coming here and getting vaccinated. But the other aspect that I'm sure everybody will agree with, there are so many multi-generational homes, whereas you have your abuela or abuelo living with you, maybe your tia, your tío, so many people from the household. So if you have frontline workers, they're all living in the same whole house. So everyone's going to be exposed. So I think that's been a problem for our community as well.
Thank you. I want to encourage all, if you have questions, please do add those into the chat. We're trying to monitor that, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. The other thing, you talked about workforce development and entrepreneurship, and I'm wondering how we can, for instance, I know the Latinx community has been well respected. The work ethic is unquestionable, and they are the backbone pretty much of our service economy, our farm economy. But, I think we'd all like to see them have a path forward, a path upwards. And so I'd like to ask you if you can contribute, how can we help stimulate that direction or provide the resources for the community that may be in those entry-level jobs to advance into management or maybe business ownership? Is there some things that we could do maybe at a policy level, legislation or education? Thank you.
Policy-wise, I fight this daily. We offer a career stackable credential. certified by the U.S. Department of Labor and the University of Central Missouri, who helped us work through a financial office processor that has an entrepreneurial spin to it, as well as a financial administrator that has an entrepreneur. 140 hours that apply towards an associate's degree, career stackable credentials, all designed within modules that are cost effective for a small business owner or an individual who has struggled in the traditional institutional career path, seeking a degree. We know that the recession is not going to be fair as we come out of the recession, unless the state of Missouri and the federal government get together and do away with these restrictions that will prevent post-secondary benefit opportunities or professional licensing. Those must change. The great state of Missouri, we have DACA students that graduate. We invest heavily in them. If they go from K through 12, it's average about $120,000 we've invested in that person. To not allow them to go into in-school tuition opportunities, or to allow them to seek a certificate-based credential through the U.S. Department of Labor that will keep them in place in the state of Missouri, we are not doing the right economic decision. We're not making the right economic decision. We must take a lead in the state of Missouri to make that change. We must take the lead and advocate for those professional credentials to be accepted and reimbursed back for these DACA students. I don't want to get in an immigration conversation, but we do know there are steps for immigration reform, but the DACA student is the early and the best investment we as a state or as a country can invest in. And those would be the beginning steps to help place a return on investment of what we've already put in. We're happy to have those students K through 12. After that, we send them on their way, and that's not productive for our community.
Karlos, you're muted.
Yeah, Jeff, I would also, as it relates to legislation, obviously a hot topic right now is voting rights and impediments to voting. I think being able to have our voices heard, I think will be important. In addition to that, I'm not sure we should become a sanctuary city, but certainly more open or more welcoming to a lot of immigrants. I know that the United States of America does not have an official language, but the state of Missouri has English as its official language. And I think that just tells a story when we're looking at, even trying to get some of the federal documents translated. There are some people that still hold on to the idea that it must be in English because that's what the state dictates. And throughout my 10 years being here in Missouri, there has been a lot of legislation that's really tried to keep immigrants from being here. Once upon a time when we were talking about a China hub here in Missouri, there was also a legislation that said you had to take your driver's license test in English only. Well, if we have foreigners investing in Missouri, investing in our region, and they bring their family, but now essentially their family is condemned to be at home because they can't get a driver's license, that's not welcoming. And that's just an example of the types of different types of legislations that we've seen here in Missouri to make it not be a very welcoming place. And in addition to, while there may be in theory some incentives for foreigners to move to Missouri when they start a business, I think it could be more welcoming versus checking a box and saying, oh yeah, we have this policy, but really, are you recruiting? Are you trying to bring people here? And I think that Pedro's comment about DACA students, and pretty much when it's time for them to be done with school, we send them away. We didn't take advantage of that education that we gave them here in the country, and be able to maybe get a scientist out of this, an inventor out of this. And I think it's really important that some of this legislation make it easier and make it a more welcoming state for immigrants.
If I could follow up to Karlos's comment on the EB-5 investment opportunities, those are very key pieces that are typically deemed flyover opportunities for the great state of Missouri. We see it heavily done on the East Coast and West Coast, and more selectively from the Middle Eastern and Asian markets. We don't see it so much in our Latin American partners to the south of us. One of the most critical voting changes that must be made is the 1-to-1 assistance ratio. Today, the state of Missouri has a 1-to-1. If I was to take my limited English speaking, reading, speaking parent to the voting polls. I have a mom and dad. I've got to make a choice. Is it mom or is it dad I'm going to assist? Arkansas, to the south of us, has a 1-to-6 ratio where one individual can help up to 6 people. We must change and get caught up with the times. We all want to have and exercise our democracy. For many reasons, it's important, whether it's based off of increased taxes, increased different programs throughout our state. We must allow the educational component and the assistance component to be changed. So the 1-to-1 ratio that we have here in Missouri is probably one of the worst in the Midwest, and it must be changed.
We do have a question here that I want to turn to. Sal Valdez asked, are there possibilities for potential collaboration between organizations present and other Latinx organization in today's event? And you may not have all the names of who we have here, but if you can share some maybe good collaborations that you're looking at or you've undertaken, that may serve as a good example as well.
Yeah, I will share that while I have not necessarily spoken to either Pedro or Izzy, I will say that I've long told Karlos Gomez, my counterpart in Kansas City, that we really need to come together, particularly as it relates to legislation, and really bring our two chambers together to go to Jefferson City more often and to advocate for businesses. In addition to that, I know Izzy in the past, I believe we've used her as a resource as it relates to recruiting in Puerto Rico. And we are actually picking up the torch for that initiative again this year and do plan to have a few job fairs in Puerto Rico in November. So I think that there are opportunities for us to work with Izzy and utilize her expertise. And Pedro, as it relates to economic development, I'm certainly always open to the possibility. So as always, Sal Valadez, I appreciate the question and your forethought into bringing people together.
Yeah, and just to add a little tie on that, Karlos, yes, we could definitely work together. I love partnerships. It's literally part of our name and it's what we do. It's how we get the needle moving forward, is working together instead of everyone trying to build their own thing. And I think not just in terms of legislation, but also the explanation to the community itself. What I've noticed is a big part of my job is being the bridge, because there's such a divide between legislations or companies or businesses or resources between the actual community. And I think a big reason for that is when people are sitting, and I've noticed across the table, and they're saying, hey, we're gonna need workers, we're gonna need this, or we're gonna need that. It's never thought about, as we said before, in the community aspect. You have to turn on your human hat. You are a service to people. So you have to think about people. You have to think about your day-to-day life. I think sometimes we use certain terminologies or put information out there that is just overly complicated, and it's just finding a way to simplify that, to talk to the mom and pop that are just wanting to open, their shops, or educating them on, hey, there are these opportunities, these funding things, and this is what it would look like for your students if they're wanting to join in this kind of career, more exposure opportunities. And that's why for us, we've decided that, yes, we're going to do, these big events like the Puerto Rico side of things, or we also do like job fairs for our high school students, because we've realized that we can sometimes have Latino families that are here in the community and then they do leave to go to other states. And however, we're like, well, what can we do to make sure that they realize that there are opportunity and career paths here? How can we solidify that? So we usually stay closely connected to surveys, or I tell a lot of our employees, like, hire people that speak Spanish fluently. Because a lot of times, a lot of Latino families will have questions or want to know information about vaccines, or want to know information about how can I start this business? And for us, we have a small business development center. We have a Taney County Health Department. And on both those aspects, I say, hey, if you don't have anyone in your office, you can send them my way. Let me know what those resources are. I will talk to them individually, but I'm one person. So what I do is also showcase, like, hey, if us as a chamber, we have this person, you need to have that person, and you better pay them well. And you better, if they don't have certain educations, but you know that they are trainable, you can start them in an entry level and have this career pathway. So I always say, worry less for every business or every organization about what everyone else is doing. Here are some starter steps. How can you implement these? Let's see how these go, and then move forward from there. Yeah.
I'm glad we kind of got on this topic of entrepreneurship, because I'm familiar that Latinx, you often see new entrepreneurs. When I was working with them, they were starting restaurants, landscaping companies and construction. They're well known. And but of course, we have many other industries. And I'm wondering, has there been any work to identify maybe some broadening or their horizons, if you will, or some other industries that we might be able to help them get into that would also supplement their funding and so forth?
What we see is a big shift in education, and it's all about access to technology. We were talking about the digital divide, rural, urban, and suburban, but working with the state of University of Missouri, Columbia, we've identified career stackable credential opportunities and the now jobs, tomorrow jobs, and the future jobs are. So we're rating those as we build our pipeline of opportunities. I sit on the National Board for Launch Code. We brought it to Kansas City, Missouri, and we launched our first bilingual coding curriculum in the state of Missouri. We're going to work with our partners in St. Louis. Launch Code is in St. Louis already. HEDC has taken our business development course, and forgive me, I'm not going to try to remember the name of the company. So we've been in St. Louis with our business development financial literacy training program. Just this morning, we had a 2-hour session with the CDFI world to talk about CDFI collaborations in the state of Missouri. At the end of the day, we realize that career stackable credentials in the coding application development world are going to be the answers to a lot of second and third generation small businesses. It's not just in the urban core. We are challenged to see how do we collectively bring together measurable outcomes in our systemic food industries, in our small rural farming communities. How do we educate them and prepare them that financials do matter and reporting metrics, and get them involved with the programs that are funded by the federal government, where they qualify. We must consider and find out ways where they qualify. So technology application development is, I believe, the first in the next 5, 7, 10-year solution for a lot of our students, a lot of our Missourians of all ages and demographics.
So I really feel like when we're talking about this subject, and again, I go back to, I feel like there's no middle ground. Either people are immigrants or they're American born and educated. So I think as regards to industries that we get into, I really think we're all over the board, which in my opinion is a good thing. You know, I think, stereotypically and historically, we were put into landscaping and construction, and I think the fact that we've become more diverse, more educated, and as our Latino generations get further removed from whatever homeland it is, I think we've diversified in the businesses that we're getting into. That being said, I really do think that we need to really add more training, whether it's through unions, whether it's through community colleges. I know here in the metro area of St. Louis, the community college is trying to pass Prop R, which would essentially add an 8-cent tax to be able to create the infrastructure for the school, for the community colleges. And even though, let's say, Biden's proposal to have everybody have free community college, well, it can be free, but if your buildings are falling apart, it's not going to help. So I think that's one of the things that we need to look at. But the training itself, giving access to education, particularly for the DACA students, language access. And while if I just came to this country, at some point I will learn English, but right now it may be just easier for me to know the rules, the policies. How do I start an LLC in Spanish? That's not to say that I won't eventually learn English, but today I want to start a business today and my English is not strong enough. So even for our programs, our business counselors required to be in Spanish, because even though a lot of the people she works with, they may know English, they just may feel more comfortable in Spanish. And I think it's important to be able to meet people where they are. So I think it's really important for us to have different Spanish curriculums, provide technical assistance, whether in English and Spanish, and just being able to teach them about banking, for example. There's many Latin American countries where the concept of FDIC doesn't exist. So if my money in Mexico is at the branch of Tlaxcala in Uruguay, and that bank gets robbed, my money is literally gone. So I think when a lot of Latino immigrants come to this country, they don't believe in banking, so they're literally hiding their money in the mattress. paying for a home in cash, paying for a car in cash. So just some of the American concepts, including networking. That's one of the biggest ones we're trying to work on, because most Latin American countries, it's dog eat dog world. So to think that there's an organization there that is trying to help you, no strings attached, that's a foreign concept. So I think keeping in mind who your population is, whether they are an international person or whether they are a US born citizen. I think there's two different populations that need two different types of assistance.
We must take a look and work with our state legislators to put bills on the floor that are going to support us as we look at the new economic trends coming out of COVID. Fintech technologies, Bitcoin are definitely taking over, not only in Latin American countries, but we're seeing it globally. We're seeing innovative cost reduction from small business owners and folks that catch on. Latinos catch on to technology pretty quick. We all have our phones. It's 500 billion, there are 5 billion phones out there. There's 1.6 billion people out there that can buy a phone. The fintech technology, if we don't take a lead in it here in the state of Missouri and try to adopt it on the state floor, to find ways to put in community-based capital, to support entrepreneurship, to support home ownership, to support programs that are going to require an additional 1/8 cent sales tax, we will be in trouble as a state of Missouri. We will not come out of this recession as we did in the recession in 2008. What we must also be aware of are what does the state of Missouri citizens have an appetite for? Is it, or I'm not going to say immigration reform. What is the common thing we all have in common? Are we paying too much taxes? Are we not earning enough? Our cost of goods are going up. We as a state must take control over that and make the suggestions to our legislative leaders in Jefferson City. We have been working at the state level with several legislators to talk about place-based capital, community capital, to where we can take, for an example, a small business starts up, pays an individual $15 an hour, $12 is paid at the US rate of $1 for dollar. $3 is paid at $1.50 based off community-based capital. These are programs that have helped recover other countries in greater financial crisis. And we must be innovative in trying to find a solution as a state with all our legislative powers to help them adopt these type of economic tools to help us recover.
Well, we're getting towards the end of our time, but I do see that Priscilla had Mwamba asked a question, and it's basically around, are you aware of other Chamber of Commerce organizations around the state that are doing something similar? And that was addressed to Izzy. And but I would like to go ahead and propose that as the last kind of wrap-up question on how people can get involved, especially even if they're in rural areas that may not have a chamber, how they can become more involved in helping the Latinx community.
Yeah, I would say we do have different networking opportunities as a chamber involvement. So we do have things like Missouri Economic Development Council. And so others from other communities, or sometimes from chamber members or other partnerships, branch of entities. And then we do get together and say, hey, here's some vision initiatives. The main thing we do is share ideas. This is how it worked in our area. These are the steps that we took. What are you doing? So, but we're always bumping into more as we network and as we service the community. There ends up being a connection to someone else and someone else. So on that aspect, yes. And if there is anyone that honestly has any startup questions, I had someone else that had messaged me during this time, and I just gave them my contact information, say, hey, we can have a follow-up chat afterwards. I am an open book. I'm all about, let's share resources, get this stuff going. It's been too hard for too long for many of us. I mean, my parents were both immigrants into this country. And so I am a first generation American, but I grew up very, 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 very poor due to circumstances, lack of, no one knowing English until I finally, grew up having to learn both type things. So I feel like I grew up in both realms. And so I actually use it a lot to help the community that I serve. And this is why I'm so passionate about making sure that we do get together and share that information, because someone else is just like my family. And I didn't have any of these resources. Unfortunately, it was the same thing of not having the community aspect or not knowing the right people to actually have access to even things that, let's say, if there were legislative changes, I wouldn't even know what those things were back in the day. So now that I, went through this like educational system, and for me, very blessed, I met one person that really kind of helped me get kickstarted, which is why networking and mentorship is so important. Now it's my turn to kind of give that back. So yes, if you would like to have that contact as chamber, go ahead and just shoot me a direct message, and then I can share my information with you as well.
Thank you.
I think one of the most compelling efforts for our state and for our country is the Community Navigator, sponsored by the SBA, that is encouraging collaborative efforts both at the 3 different levels: your national level, your state level, and then your rural level, because one financial bucket does not fit all. We're participating. I took a phone call last night at 5:30, and I was asked to join a Southwestern initiative that's taken place. And I trust the individual who called me, and I'm going, Izzy, I hope we can connect, because I think it expands the footprint of what they're asking us to do to serve the Latino community. We're leading as a national market hub in the Kansas City, Missouri region. We've picked up 4 EDCs that serve some critical components. However, as I mentioned, that is just the beginning. We have to have a common policy conversation between the east side of the state and the west side of the state. We're not in competition with each other, and we shouldn't think that way. We're in this together. Missouri I love it. I mean, I'm born and bred and I live here. We must find ways to continue to grow our state and make it a welcoming center for innovation and ideas.
I will also add, Jeff, that I've had several people reach out to our Chamber of Commerce, and we're always open to it. I know that the Columbia Chamber was, I think, going to be called Mi Gente, and in the chat, I know it's kind of defunct right now, but we're always open to helping. I know there's one in Peoria, Illinois, that was thinking about starting that I said we'd be willing to help. The Asian Chamber here considers us their big brother, because when we think about just even immigrants working together, I think it's really important. And when it's all said and done, rising tides will lift all boats. So I think us being able to help anybody in our metro area, I think is important for all of us to do well in the metro area, and hopefully catch up to Kansas City in many ways, but also continue to move forward in our own way.
Well, I appreciate your participation today, folks. I know I learned a lot. This is a pretty complex, I think, issue, but as long as we keep the communications and collaboration doors open, I think we'll continue to see great things for Missouri and for the Latinx community. And I look forward to seeing those and supporting that. Unfortunately, there may be some additional questions coming in. I think if you forward those to Lisa, we know how to get in contact with these folks, and hopefully they would be able to continue answering any unanswered questions that we have, and look forward to working. So I'm going to hand it back over to Gerardo or Lisa. Lisa, I believe it's you. And again, I thank you for your time today, folks, and the ability for me to participate in this conversation.
Jeff,
Yes.
thank you for those questions that you sent out last night. I think it really pushed, it kept me up at night thinking how we were going to answer these questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on behalf of the Latinx Communities in Missouri Project Initiative, a big thank you to all of our presenters today. This was a really rich discussion, and I know there were lots of questions and observations in the chat. So I wanted to thank each of you. I wanted to ask if maybe each of you could put your email address in the chat. Izzy and Pedro and Karlos. And again, Isandra Martinez Hughes is from the Branson Lake Area Chamber of Commerce. Karlos Ramirez is from the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Metropolitan St. Louis. And Pedro Zamora is from the Hispanic Economic Development Corporation. And I believe Gerardo put all their websites up there earlier. Gerardo, if you could copy and paste that into the chat again, we'd love to have everybody kind of check out their websites. I think there was some good synergy. Jeff Samborski, I want to thank you so much for moderating. He's a MU Extension Community Development Specialist with a special interest in economic development. I want to also I don't want people to forget about our sponsor for this whole series. This presentation that you saw today is just one of 6 webinars we're having over the course of these next few months. We may continue to have these kinds of discussions as we see it's been very fruitful, but I want to thank LIUNA and the Missouri-Kansas Laborers District Council for sponsoring all 6 of our webinars, and we're so grateful to them for their support. I will put their website up into the chat as well. And I also want to thank the other member organizations of this committee, the organizing committee. We had Gerardo from the UMKC Institute for Human Development Alianzas, Gerardo Martinez. I am from the MU Extension Community Arts Program. Laura Pita is from the University of Missouri Extension Council of Boone County. Sal Valadez is from the Hispanic Leaders Group of St. Louis, and Tish Johnson is from the Community Development Program of University of Missouri Extension, and our chairperson, Veronica Perez Picasso from the MU Cambio Center. So those are the people working to set up these webinars. This is all part to highlight the important contributions to this state of the Latinx communities in all different realms: economics, cultural, social. We have several other programs coming up. Our next webinar, and these are held monthly, our next webinar is going to be on August 6th, and this is going to be actually a documentary film screening from a professor at University of Missouri, Juana Maria Cordones Cook. She's going to do a documentary film screening. We already have the registration up. It's a free program. It is part of the bicentennial celebrations. This is the Missouri Bicentennial this year. And this initiative, these webinars, are the only statewide effort to recognize Latinx communities as part of the Missouri Bicentennial. So I think it's a really important project. It's important that we acknowledge these significant contributions, and we're so grateful to be an official Bicentennial Alliance partner and have these contributions recognized. So I'm going to put up our website. You can find out all about our upcoming programs. You can find out about events that are coming up. And let me just get back to the website, and I'll put that up into the chat. Here is our, I'm putting that up into the chat right now. It's the LCMI initiative, Latinx Communities in Missouri. And eventually we will have all 6 programs. But again, August 6th, we'll have an in-person video screening. We're also going to be live streaming it, so you can join in even if you can't get to Columbia, Missouri that day. You'll be able to join in. And again, it's a free program. We'll have more programs on traditional oral traditions in Latinx communities, on emerging leaders. So there's still some great materials coming up. So I want to thank you all again, your presenters today. Thank you all for joining us. This is being recorded and will be put up on the website. So if you missed it or only saw a portion of it today, or if you have more questions, feel free to check in there. I will be sending an email out to all registered participants. So we want to thank you again. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. And celebrate everything that's Latinx contributions to Missouri. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go have a beer right now, Lisa. Mexican restaurant. See you guys.
Look at the Corona.
Yes, Corona. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks,
Ricardo,
everybody.
enjoy your service.
Thank you
What's
all.
that?
Pleasure meeting everyone.
Thanks all.
Yes, thank you again, each of you. Thank you so much.